Hey, everybody, and welcome once again to the Chattanooga Film Festival. My name is Dustin, and I'm excited and honored to be joined by the team behind CROSSWORD, which is playing as part of our virtual lineup this year. Here's the log line. Following the death of their daughter, Tessa pours herself into her best-selling children's book series, Lily Learns, while her husband, James, attempts to find solace in the daily crossword, but quickly unravels as it takes on a mind of its own. So we've got something like 8 people on this call today. So I'm going to call you guys out by your first names, and you can introduce yourselves and state what your role in this production was. So let's start with Matthew.
Matthew Robert Cooper. I was the composer, music.
All right, Ed, you're up.
Yonaitis. I was the editor on the film.
Burke.
Burke Doeren. I was the cinematographer on the film.
Liana.
Hi, I'm Liana Montemayor. I was one of the producers on the film.
Rafi.
Rafi Jacobs, producer.
Steven.
Steven, one of the producers on behalf of Static Films, and I also first AD'd the movie.
And Michael.
Michael Vlamis, director, co-writer, producer, actor.
Excellent. All right, we're gonna start with Michael. I want you to basically just tell me the story of the genesis of this project, and I guess more specifically, for context for our audience, how a real life tragedy drove the creation of this story.
Yeah, definitely. So the origin of it started during COVID. I was locked up with my writing partner, Kyle Anderson, who's not able to make it today. And then a few other buddies, collaborators of ours, and we were trying to figure out what to do with our days and get our minds straight. And basically we started doing the crossword puzzle every morning. And from there, it was just kind of like, what if the clues and the answers started to pertain to our lives? And that was the seed of the idea. And then Kyle and I just started working on it from there. And it had been a year at that point since this horrible accident happened at a bachelor party in 2019, and I thought I had kind of moved past that. I lost a buddy on at that party. I mean, he literally died in a freak accident, and a year had passed, and the body kind of remembers. I think that it was like stored in my nervous system or something, but I wasn't consciously thinking about it, but I started feeling so strange in May of 2020, right when I had this idea. And when I realized what was going on and kind of replaying the accident, and all of a sudden that was creeping up on me, it just felt like all the guilt, the grief, the trauma, the, trying to move forward. It was so prevalent that's what CROSSWORD became. So from that little kernel of an idea, it became this study on guilt and grief, which was because it was just so in me at that time and truthful. And in life, we're looking for answers all around us. And I was looking for an answer of like how to move forward, just like all the guys were at that bachelor party. Hi, Kelly Fallon, our production designer. And so what was like a study of what I was going through in life became James's journey in CROSSWORD, just in a different circumstance.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And yes, you mentioned that Kelly Fallon, production designer, has showed up. Hello, Kelly.
Hi, so sorry. My doctor's appointment ran late this morning.
You're totally fine. We've just really kicked it off. I'm going to toss a question to the producers. So Steve and Rafi, Liana, as producers, not to sound too much like a minimum wage job interview, but I'd like to hear your perspective on, this is a one location film, but it has, as a one location film, it has, I'm sure, very unique challenges. And I want to hear about the biggest or most unique challenges that you faced with this production in all of its idiosyncrasies and how you face those challenges. And any one of you can jump in and start this.
Well, I think the most natural starting point was with the house itself, because it's single location film, but it's also a film where the lead, character is an architect. He's designed his own home. And so there's a story component. We couldn't just find any old house. And we also had to find a house which is where we come in that is friendly to hosting a production for 3 uninterrupted weeks, which means it's both good and bad, because on the one hand, you get to keep all your gear and all your people coming back to the same place every morning. On the other hand, we have to shoot in every single room of that house and make it look interesting and compelling and different day after day. And, Burke, Kelly, and Michael here were putting so many creative ideas together as to how to do that and continue to make this location feel compelling. And then it was incumbent on Rafi, Liana, and myself to figure out how to orchestrate all those moving parts. And certainly some challenges arose, but I would say the one that stands out the most is simply the time when we were 6 days away from our first day of production, and the house we had fully creatively prepped for pulled the plug on us, and we had to scramble to get another one and re-prep everything, like less than a week before shooting. And that's the movie that you saw, is the house that, we found with hours notice, made a quick pivot, and super proud of just everyone on this call for figuring out how to do that. I think the movie's better because of it.
Rafi, Liana, do you have something you'd like to talk about or add to that?
Yeah, I mean, that was certainly the biggest, most challenging obstacle that, we're accustomed to just rolling with the punches. Steven and Liana, myself, had produced a couple features prior to this, couple after, so we had a good rapport that, we're certainly all up for the challenge of it all. But for a house that creatively checked all the boxes for the film, but logistically, didn't have a ton of space to spread out and kind of accompany our footprint. So just tip our hats to this entire production and crew of just rolling with the punches and having to shuffle staging areas and gear and vehicles just kind of at will throughout the schedule to just make it work for one day, half a day, move things back and just keep it moving. I'd say we had some really interesting happy accidents that worked out creatively. One that stands out to me was we were shooting in the valley right near the 405 freeway, and the morning of one of our shoot days, there happened to be a shooting on the freeway that had shut down the major exit that we needed to get off to get to our house easily. So that delayed everybody's start time, kind of threw off our day a little bit. But what really worked out creatively was there were helicopters circulating in the sky above the house for that accident, which we then quickly pointed our cameras up to and added a very interesting paranoia aspect that played really well creatively with the story, with the characters, with the character of James's spiraling out. That definitely boosted our production value considerably, I would say.
Yeah, there's the best production value is free production value, right? Where you get a nice boost and you don't have to pay anything for it, really. Liana, do you have anything that you'd like to add about your experience on the film?
I think both what Rafi and Steven said, a lot of what the house was for us was really inspiring, because also it happened to be something that was used in The Gift, that it was the same house from that. So we, were able to use some new inspirations. Obviously, Kelly had redesigned it in a special way. So that was definitely one of the things that stood out to me the most. I don't know. I think it was a lot of the crew. I think because we had been working on a couple movies together, we were able to put it together, some people that were friends beforehand and that we trusted. And so I think a lot of this movie came from love of all of us putting in our heart and soul for 3 weeks together and being there for each other when happy accidents happened and big other things had happened before. So I think there's just a lot of love for the crew on this one, because we had all worked together, all been there for each other, and we just made it work.
It's kind of amazing to me. Actually, it's really amazing hearing that that the original house was pulled out from under you, and this was kind of a last minute, solution, because the design of the house, as something that's very much almost a glass house. Like you've got very tall open windows. It makes it feel like a zoo or something, like a zoo enclosure where something inside that's happening to these characters is sort of like carnal or primal or something like that. This descent into madness and dealing with these really raw emotions. And I also see parallels to Edward Hopper's Nighthawks, which, gets a nod in the film. So it's kind of amazing that the house worked out that way, because it's got this, the glass, I think, is like a really important element visually that enhances, I guess, the themes that are going on in the movie. But that does lead me to wanting to talk about Edward Hopper's Nighthawks. Because I do feel, Burke, I'm talking to you, I feel like I see some of not only John Alcott's like The Shining composition, especially in those symmetrical close-ups, like in the third act, with actors looking right down the barrel of the lens, but what I see isn't necessarily what is. So were there any graphic touchstones that you were working from on this that you would like to share? I see a sort of parallel in the color palette in Nighthawks, which I mentioned before. Like, am I right on any of those? What were your touchstones on this?
Yeah, so Michael Vlamis and I have known each other since film school. Went to Chapman years ago, and we've worked on a ton of stuff since then. This is by far the most dramatic and I think personally meaningful. We actually shot a short version of CROSSWORD a year earlier in a house that I used to live in Long Beach that was also mid-century. And I think when we did that, we got to experiment with a lot of the initial color decisions and things that would later influence everything about the feature. But yeah, I mean, Nighthawks was definitely an inspiration from day one. And one thing that I think it was very fortunate that we got to do on this film is we got to shoot with some Hawk V-Light anamorphic lenses. They're just fantastically beautiful anamorphic lenses that have, like, I think just the right amount of character where you can kind of feel some of the characteristics of the lenses coming into play, but it's not like lens flare city, it's just, it feels like a very organic touch. The colors are all matched. They feel, it feels like a way to turn an airy digital camera into a film camera in a way.
Yeah.
So because we're an indie, we only had 4 focal lengths, which that's a 10 lens set if you got the full set. So we basically had the widest lens in the set, 20 mil, the longest lens, 140 mil, and then a 35 and an 80. And so what that did is it actually forced us to be more decisive about what coverage we wanted, because we only had a wide, we only had a medium close-up, we only had a long lens, and then we had a portrait lens. And so it was actually kind of nice for an NDR scale to have just those exact lenses to choose from. One of the lenses we did have was a probe lens, and that really comes into play with like the pencil on.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah. Those shots are like in that, especially that one particular scene where, like, you've got these zooming shots over the paper, and it's very dynamic. I love that.
I think Vlamis and I spent like 10 hours after principal photography wrap, just like picking up those shots in my living room. So
you did so much probing.
Yeah, we did a whole bunch of probe.
So much of I feel like too, with the framing, that a lot of it was, right, Burke, like talking about how Edward Hopper's Nighthawks feels like you're being observed. We wanted that for the movie. Some of the frames are definitely set up to try to mimic Edward Hopper's Nighthawks. Even there's a shot outside the window while James is looking at the painting that is offset to even feel like that painting. Yeah. And then straight up, Kelly and her team too, that whole color scheme is completely by design. Mm-hmm. I think early on, Kelly pitched, what if we did the color scheme from the painting, because the painting was so prevalent. And from there,
it's a bold choice. Honestly, I think it's a really bold choice, because the movie mostly takes place during the day. So but it still manages to feel, it's like, it's Dayhawks, man. Like that's what it is, right? It's Nighthawks by day is what it feels like ultimately.
Yeah, I think so many films, and this is something we talked about too, Burke, a lot. on the short, when we were coloring it and designing the short, which is what we used to raise the financing for the feature, I went a little darker. I went like an It Comes at Night vibe. And then as more I sat on it and we knew what lenses we wanted to use, which are the same lenses they used on Moonlight, one of my favorite films, I thought about how honestly sometimes annoying it is that you can have this horrible tragedy happen in your life, no matter what it is. But I'm looking outside right now. It is absolutely beautiful. And it would be beautiful no matter how I'm feeling today. And there's something about that. And so life does go on. I know that this ending of this movie can be interpreted several ways, but to me, there's some optimism in there, to me personally. And I felt like the movie I didn't want to go with kind of the status quo of a movie like this and make it dark. I wanted to make it beautiful, and Kelly and Burke and everybody, teaming up on that. I mean, they really accentuated that.
I'd like to jump to Kelly real quick if we can. I'm very interested in the children's book, like the design of the covers. And I can't remember off the top of my head if there are any interiors. I think maybe there are. But I think it does belong in the pantheon of great fictional children's books from movies like Amazing Amy from Gone Girl, or The Babadook or something like that. But talk to me about the process of making those books for the production design.
Yeah, so a lot of the text for the books came from the script. I think we actually only ended up, because it was an indie, doing the cover. So we were lucky enough. I have a friend who's a fabulously talented graphic designer, Claire, and she agreed to come on board and help us with both the crosswords and the children's book covers. So I think we went through one or two. I had pulled like references and shown them to Michael, and then Claire did a initial concept, and we gave her some notes, but she pretty much nailed it from my memory. Michael, you correct me if I'm wrong. So there were pretty minimal notes, and then we scaled it to match books that we could get. And in our mind, kind of one of the key was sort of quantity. We wanted to see these books like are taking over this room. There's kind of boxes everywhere. We wanted to really show it was like a large first print, which means like that's hard to get, to kind of showcase her success as a writer. So we had we had like a limited number of covers, and we just tried to pop those on top of as many stacks as we could to make it feel like, as big as we wanted it to feel.
Awesome. Yeah. I definitely know what that's like. My wife is an author, and her author copies are all over our house. So I definitely know that feeling, and it evokes it very well. But yes, I loved the design of the children's books, and it brought so much like, realism to their world and like kind of how they experience it inside this glass case. So Matthew, I want to talk about how the film struck you when you saw it, and what textures. I feel like textures is the right word to use, especially with the kind of music that you make, like adding the textures of your soundscape to Crossword. What was it that you were trying to add? And I also, if you could also add this into your answer, I want to know if the Foley was done before the music or afterward, because it feels like there's a lot of moments where the music and the sound design are acting in such concert that it makes me wonder who was there first, so to speak. So if you can talk about all that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I guess when I first saw it, the first thing that kind of like the thoughts that started swirling in my head were kind of mental health kind of tropes, I guess. And that led me to, like, as far as what I normally do as Illuvium, it's definitely very textural, obviously, ambient kind of in nature. And what I love about film scoring is it allows me to sort of break out of that natural state and explore other territories in music. And in Michael's film, he was so gracious to allow me to sort of be kind of go wherever I really wanted and be pretty experimental with it. And so I chose like prayer bowls and chimes and even like tea kettle whistles and things like that to create the sound design, because it sort of felt like, a person dealing with such heavy things would be kind of surrounded by those sorts of things. But as the film progresses, you start using them to almost create like little ticks and twitches in the brain that kind of feel like everything's starting to become going off the rails, I guess, a little bit. But outside of that, I also kind of felt like the film had kind of a classic sort of almost like Hitchcockian kind of vibe to it as well. There's like almost like whodunit kind of stuff happening in it as well. So I wanted to play with those experimental sounds, but also kind of do something that was sort of just like direct, over the top, like Bernard Herrmann-y kind of drilling stuff in your face type of sounds as well. So it was just a matter of kind of finding the balance between those two things and, shooting for the moon and seeing what happens.
What about the Foley? Who was there first?
Michael, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, you were there first. You were there first. And then our sound design team over at Melody Gun in Los Angeles, Thomas and Ahmed, they are absolutely amazing. And I mean, they really melded. The score was set, and then they started doing sound design, and they just melded everything perfectly. And Matthew was, everybody was here for the collaboration, right? So if we needed to fade something here or bring something in a little later, I mean, we were adjusting very, very slightly, just to make everything meld. Or there are some hard cuts of music in the movie as well, which that was something that we had to really discuss, because it's like, well, that's not seamless. That's like when you could feel the camera in a movie. But I like things like that as long as they invoke the right feeling. But yeah, just a big collaboration. But the music was there first, and then sound design stepped in and did a tremendous job.
Yeah, it's amazing. I felt like moments where you can hear like the sounds of drowning feel like they're part of the score, and I'm like, but does it count as part of the score? Like, I feel like ultimately, like, it is part of the score. It's, or the overall just the soundscape of the film.
I kind of feel like some of the best score work usually is kind of a blurring of those elements and collaborating together for real.
Yeah, and a lot of it was kind of a lot of the tone. I shared a bunch of temp music with Ed, and Ed just kind of dropped them in on his first cut of the film at the perfect moments, and we kind of lived with where that music was playing and kind of went from there when presenting the movie to Matthew. So Ed is a genius when it comes to music placement and what feels right for the scene. I mean, obviously he's got a huge feel for film as an editor, but that really, dropping music in places where I didn't even think about that song there. Yeah, that's a great idea. And then we evoke a new feeling through manipulating the score in that section.
I do want to talk to Ed. Ed, so Michael mentioned sending you music to drop in. Were you kind of left to your own devices, or were there days when Michael was in the booth with you? Like, what, how did that relationship work? And how did you guys overcome like challenges of building a proper fever pitch, I guess, or a proper descent into madness kind of thing? Because that's always like this push and pull all the way through. I understand how that goes.
And thank you for that intro, Michael. The as far as like building out the first edit, Michael sent me a list, like a playlist of songs. We talked a lot about what he was going for, and in general terms, when I'm doing the first edit, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, it's been a while, so I'm trying to recall like the order of events, but like, you had all the footage already already shot. And I'm used to just building, like talking to the director, taking my own time to build out the first edit, just on my own, just thinking about what Mike said, just trying to follow the scripts and stay true to it. And then after that, it was, I think any director would agree that seeing that first cut they want to die. They call it the suicide cut just because like the director is usually like, oh my gosh, like, what are we doing? But no, and if my memory serves, Michael was very upbeat about getting it to where to like he was very happy with like finally seeing how it cuts together and just getting it more and more in line with like, you know, basically making it perfect. And it was honestly just straight from after I sent him that cut, we were basically on Zoom together every day because I live in upstate New York. Michael was bouncing around, I think, Chicago and California. And yeah, we've actually never met in person. But he feels like, you know, at this point, he's a brother to me. No, it's, yeah, no, it was just jamming on Zoom every day. And, you know, it's a workflow that, you know, has kind of become more and more prevalent in recent years. And I'm sure anyone would prefer to be together in the room together, just jamming it out. But honestly, like having, you know, Michael in the corner here with my, you know, sequence timeline and everything. And he's able to see everything I'm doing. And at that point, just like, you know, we were able to live in the moment and really, you know, feel each other out. But yeah, as far as like overcoming things, it's really, you know, just trial and error. Like, you know, Michael, you know, talks me up, but he has his own edit, you know, like he has his own edit impulses and he does his own edits. And I think I really like appreciate it. And another thing was I should mention that I appreciate when I first got on was, you know, in the back of my mind, I was a little hesitant about it because Michael being the director, you know, I'm used to talking to them, being open about, you know, what they got and what I think is working, what isn't, but also he's a star. So I was kind of worried that I was going to be flippant or too hard on him, but he's more hard on himself than anyone else. So I just, you know, I appreciated that. But yeah, no, I don't know if that answered everything, but yeah, it was basically just jamming on it together. Michael was really great to work with. Like we're just always coming up with ideas and always receptive to what like I think could work and what doesn't. Like it was a very good collaboration.
And Ed is really good at, I mean, he could do some VFX and whatnot too. So you kind of have a jack of all trades here, and which makes it so much easier to set up a cut, you know, a picture lock that you're passing off to our other collaborators to really get it. They really have a feel for what's needed here or there. And then Ed had a technical, I mean, you had to deal with aspect ratio changes, which was very interesting, you know, to like work in the timeline. And because every day of the movie, and Burke can talk about this too, right? We're shrinking the aspect ratio on our characters. So every day was shot and framed per what that day's aspect ratio was. And I mean, when I sent it off to Ed, I mean, we had to talk about that, how we're setting up the timeline, how do we want it to feel? How do we want it to look? And that was definitely like at first we had some technicalities that we had to figure out, but you were good about all that. I mean, you made my job easier for sure.
Yeah, thank you. And I should give it up for Burke too, because I talked it over with Michael, but like Burke and I, you know, we're used to dealing with the format sizes. We're talking back and forth. And, you know, after like crunching the numbers, trying to understand the ratios, making sure everything, you know, was the right number. And Burke having to explain the concept to me multiple times and me checking, make sure I was getting everything right. And me like, you know, texting him and being like, is this supposed to be here? Like that kind of thing. And then of course, explaining it to the rest of the post team and making sure everyone understands it.
That's fascinating. I love that you did that for real. Like, cause it would be so easy to just shoot everything wide and cut it up, you know, and just crop it, right? And then, you know, you've just got this the illusion of a shrinking aspect ratio, but you know, instead you know, Burke, you actually shot it that way and it, you know, did it the hard way. That's And that's awesome. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, it was basically, we wanted to visually support the idea that our lead character is descending into madness. So Monday, right, starts with nearly a full 16 by 9 frame. I think it's 17 by 9. And then by Saturday, it's all the way to a 2:3:9 to 1. So we've lost a lot of the top and bottom of the frame to just symbolize the compression that's happening to his character and how kind of tunnel vision he's becoming. And then Sunday, it becomes the actual full 16 by 9 again to fill the entire container of the video file. So, but yeah, we did it all in camera. I mean, we made custom framing guides, and so as we're shooting, we were bouncing between different days. So our scriptie would keep track of what day we were on, whether it was supposed to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then we'd switch to the correct framing guide in camera to make sure we nailed it. So it was fun. It was I think a great way to kind of subtly support what the character's going through, because if you watch it all the way through, you may not even completely notice. It's meant to not be jarring.
Yeah. Oh, the first time I watched it, I didn't notice. It was the second time that is when I noticed it. So that's pretty incredible. A very cool trick that you did for real, and I love that. I think that we're pretty much at the end of this. If there's any like cool stories from set that any of you want to jump in and start telling, any particular weird days, any kind of like spooky things that happen, like that, those are the kind of stories that I know people tend to enjoy. Is there anything that anybody can think of that any stories you'd like to tell about working on CROSSWORD?
Yeah. Go ahead, Liana.
Oh no, go. What were you gonna say?
I feel like we have so many spooky stories.
Well, but one of them was like, you're talking about the glass in the house, and we were shooting the moment where the bird flies into the window. We were like, doing it with our art decorator, and they had were throwing this like fake bird, and then a real bird ended up like flying into the window and dying right in front of us while we're shooting this scene. It was so weird. It was like, is this an omen? Like, should we be freaked out about this? But yeah, that was like one of those moments that was like super spooky that happened while we were shooting that scene. It was weird.
Literally the window pane right next to where we were shooting, all of a sudden a huge thump in the middle of the scene. God. And it was an actual bird laying, just like the crow ends up laying on that porch. And I think I was so locked into so many things on that day. I just was like, oh yeah, bird died. But it was like, wait, what? That is so strange. And then also, I mean, this was like not spooky, like Omen-esque like that was, but day one of filming, we're talking about Glass House. We're talking about how important the pool is, also in the movie, and seeing inside and out. Day one of our crew members walked through our hero window pane looking out to the pool. So that, I mean, what was that thing?
He was okay. Everything
was fine. He was okay, and the movie ended up being okay. So we're happy he's fine. But no. I'm very glad Luca is okay. But yeah, he straight up didn't realize it was a window because it was so cleaned and beautiful, made beautiful for the film, that he walked through it and it shattered all over him. And he got cut a little bit, but he ended up being all right. But now we had to literally tape garbage bags over that window and completely change the shot list to make it work while we were in limbo getting that fixed. And because we had a hole in the house where all the equipment is, we had to start taking turns being like the night watch. Like I had to sleep there a couple nights to start. I got a sty from like being so stressed about everything. That's why you see shots of me touching my eyelid in the movie. That was not written, right? I just all of a sudden started getting this bump on my eye because I was just like all doing so many things at that time. And so, you gotta work the sty into the movie. And the sty was pretty spooky. But aside from
I remember the race from an AD's perspective, like the day one, the hero window breaks that they had just spent, so much time prepping shots inside and out and towards the pool. But then at the end of the movie, because everyone who's watching this has seen the movie, right? So he has to shave his beard. And it's like a big moment for his character. And so the constant daily restructuring was how do we not have to shoot the window, but beat him to, the part where he shaves his beard. And that kind of gap kept getting smaller and smaller. It was like Rafi and Liana could speak to this more, but this window was not easy to replace. It was like
yeah, I was about to say, like, with a 3-week shoot, that would normally take 3 weeks to replace this window, or longer, like at a house about that big too. So we had to find somebody, like, I think we did it in a week, Rafi. Like, we found somebody to come and try and change this all within a week so we could stay.
Yeah, just about. Well, I mean, that window, that glass was original to the house. So, those shards were as big as your torso when that window broke. And you can't even legally get that. You have to have tempered glass now that shatters into a million pieces. But that window's, I think it was about 8 feet by 8 feet. It was stopped into the wooden wall and floor. So we had to have someone just come out for the floorboards to just handle the wood and remove that. Someone separate just for the glass to do it all right and maintain the original integrity of this beautiful mid-century home. Thankfully, homeowner was very chill, and I just remember calling her up that scary morning and having to relay that information, and she just responded with, "Well, that's why you have insurance." So just
that's what I was about to ask. Not to get too inside baseball, but like, did the production insurance cover that, or was did that add to your budget? Like,
but imagine Rafi and Liana now have full focus on handling this problem. Vlamis, Burke, and myself are huddled around a camera shooting the other parts of the movie in a separate room. Meanwhile, Kelly's in a whole other room with her art team prepping a different story for a different day. And we have no idea when the glass will be fixed and when to, shift our days around. So that was the energy going on at that house for 3 weeks straight. And I hope that the movie doesn't feel any of that. And it just,
you definitely don't feel it watching the movie. And I'm glad you talked about shaving the beard, because that instantly turns the production into a 2-part production. Like, there's before the beard and after the beard, and you can't go back, or, I mean, you can try, but it's not advised. I think that's really interesting, like how, those kind of problems present themselves. And then, cause filmmaking, any kind of art creation, it's in many cases, it's just problem solving. It's solving every single problem as it comes to you. And, a movie comes out of that. So that's part of the magic, I think. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. CROSSWORD is available to watch on the virtual side of the film festival over on Eventive. So if you haven't seen it yet, then we've just spoiled the shit out of it, but you'll still enjoy it. I promise. You should go check it out. Individual tickets, of course, are available. And I guess that'll do it for us. Thank you all so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Dream Team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chattanooga. See you guys.